Okay, hi everyone. wait. I had to make sure it was muted over on Twitch. Okay, so I am totally, utterly, absolutely experimenting right now for reasons. So basically, as you know, I work over at WizKids and I do a lot of stuff with the whole, even my mic's a little loud. Hold on. I don't want to blast eardrums out. That's really not what I want to do. And oh my gosh, so good to see so many familiar names in the chat. Hello. I have missed you all terribly. But you know, it's one of those things where, did I put my Do Not Disturb on? You're getting me full throttle Friday afternoon, like, huh? I did not. Okay, hold on. Whoa. There we go. Okay, my darlings, we are now at Do Not Disturb mode. Like, everyone else has to be quiet. My time is here with you. But yeah, so basically, you know that I work with WizKids now. And I'm coming. Mikhail, do not do this to me. It is Friday and my brain is like this close to kaput. Let me try that. Does that show up? Is that supposed to? I don't know. So anyways, what I'm doing is to sort of prep and get things ready for plans that we have over on WizKids is to experiment here with my own stuff, because quite frankly, I wanted to say hi and see how everyone's doing too. And basically have it where, see how this goes. And if this, I'm motioning over to my control panel. This is why I keep doing this. See how all of this goes and then apply it to some plans that I have for WizKids. So it's not a mini painting thing. It is not a terrain building thing, but I promise it is very much relevant to stuff that will be for mini painting and, well, I guess, yeah, terrain stuff. But it's been a week for everyone. I've just been noticing, like, on social media and whatnot, everyone is having a hard week. So I thought, you know what? Let's have some fun. Let's do something nice. And I'm going to do a fun little story time. I'm actually moving the chat over here so I can read it more easily. Let's do a nice little story time and just relax and take it easy and just, kind of have the Friday thing do its thing together. How's that sound? So I'm basically getting a feel for a program called Restream. And I have gotten my not my socials, but I have gotten my, is this working? I'm still working, right? Am I still there for you? Because I'm seeing weird things. This is the joy of, I think it's working because I'm looking at the channels themselves and they look okay. Hello, John. Oh my goodness, this is just too much fun. So anyways, I'm using Restream. I am trying to get a feel for how this thing works. She says with a very big question mark. The channels look fun. The Restream thing's a little funky. All right, note to self. Anyways, I just wanted to give this a whirl, and it's cool because I can see who's on Twitch and who is on YouTube right now. And Jake, don't play with me. If you're on both of them and you're commenting on both, I'm gonna be like, which one are we talking about? Anyways, I'm using Restream. Pretty nifty setup. I can see I have some lovely people over on YouTube. It's telling me I have 24 people watching. Hey, cool. Nice to see you again. And also 6 over on Twitch. So hi to you as well. Thank you so much. So I want to give this a feel. I don't like this feature. What I'm seeing on my control panel right now is basically like every so often it stutters on Restream, but it looks like it's moving smoothly on the channels. So I'm going to go by what I'm seeing on the channels and not Restream, because that's an alarm I forgot about. That's not what I want to focus on. I want to focus on this. It's making me wait to chat on Twitch. You're in a timeout, Jake. Hi, Cal. Hello. Oh, I'm not kidding. It is so great seeing these names, and it's been way too flippin' wrong. And I know I did like a total teaser when I did my little video for the holidays. But I did want to get a message out to you all because, I definitely miss our interactions and our chats and everything like that. It's just, I'm very busy. So if you're not aware, I do Mini Mayhem over on WizKids channel now. Kind of comparable to what the lunch break live stream was here. Every so often I will get mini painting going on there. But I also showcase products that are coming out for WizKids, are soon to release, have released, everything like that. Oh, thank you, Jake. I appreciate that. Jake's like my backup here. So what I thought as I'm getting everything kind of going here and figured out here, and oh, I just love seeing these names. This just makes me happy. I'm not kidding. What I'm going to do today is do like a fun little story time. And with the story time, there is, I guess, backstory story time. We'll call it that. If you follow me on Twitter, and I think I posted up on Facebook too, I'm going to be reading The Darkangel. I don't know how long I'm going to be reading today. I think until everyone's kind of chilled out and had some fun with it. But backstory to this is when I was younger, and I mean much, much younger. Where the WizKids streams, they're over on WizKids' YouTube channel as of now. It's called Mini Mayhem every Wednesday at noon. Like I said, it's similar to Lunch Break live stream. But you can go and check that out over there. It is YouTube/user/WizKids official is the whole drawn out thing. So what's going on with this book is basically when I was 9 or 10, I went to a Catholic school. I went to Catholic school for 11 years. Okay. So it was one of those things. I was one of those loner bookworm kids. Like literally these were my friends. So we were in the school library for library time like they do. And I would actually drive the librarian crazy because I was that kid, because I read so much. I was that kid where she'd be like, okay, well, here's your age group section. And I'd be like, nah, I'm going over here. So sure enough, I was like in the middle school section, even though I think at that time, let's see, 9 or 10 means I was at like third grade-ish. Yeah, third grade, fourth grade. So I'm this little third grader, maybe fourth grader question mark. And I stray into the older kids section because my school was weird. And I was looking through all these different books and everything. And I came across this book and it was called The Darkangel. I was totally just like, oh, that sounds really cool. And I read the back of it. And it was the quick little blurb that pulled me to be like, oh, I have to read this. So picture little 9-year-old, 10-year-old me reading this. Ariel is kidnapped by the Darkangel, a black-winged vampire of astounding beauty and youth, and taken into his castle keep. There she must serve his 13 wives, wraiths whose souls he has stolen away. Ariel knew she must kill the Darkangel before he takes his fourth bride and comes into full power, but she is captivated by his magnificent beauty and intrigued by the spark of goodness she sees in him. Will Ariel risk damaging all of humanity to save the Darkangel's soul, or can she end his reign of beautiful terror before he finds his final bride? So, yeah, I read the back of this. Remember, Catholic school. I don't know how this got into the library. I'm going to tell you this right now, because if the nuns knew this was there, it would have been gone. So I snagged the book. I checked the book out, and I think I read it in a day. I was so into it. And this was honestly my first foray into fantasy novel, vampire themed novels, everything like that. So quite frankly, where I am today, you can fully, I'm not going to say blame, credit to my having read this book when I was a little bittle. But yeah, it was one of those things. I read it. I fell in love with it. I checked it out so much when I was a child. And it was one of those things where that school stopped in 8th grade. So graduated from that school, went to high school, and I couldn't find this book. Like I genuinely looked for this book. I wanted to find it. I wanted to read it again and again and again and again. And it was one of those things I couldn't find in the bookstores either. By the way, this published in 1982. So I have a reprint in my hands. This is not the original book. It's a reprint. But it was one of those things, and no one probably even looked, Drew, you're not wrong. I bet you anything they saw Angel and they thought it was okay. Oh God, I wonder what they thought about Angel the show. Sorry, tangent. But it's one of those things where about 10 years ago, I was going through a, what are they called again? Bookstore? Not kidding, I just blanked on that one. I was wandering through a bookstore when those things were still kind of a big hit. I want to say it was Borders. Remember Borders? Oh God, Borders. I miss Borders was like my hangout. Oh my God. So I was wandering through Borders and I went to their fantasy lit and I found this. Hello, Ron. I found this. What I didn't know about this book is that it's actually a trilogy. So along with finding this book, and I wasn't even sure it was the right book because I'm like, the can't be. Picked it up. I think I screeched which, I mean, it's not a library, but still, it's a bookstore. So it probably wasn't, the best thing to have done. So I grabbed the book, read the back, and it was one of those things like, okay. This is what I have been looking for ages. This is what I've been wanting to read for decades. That one hurts. So I picked it up, and then I realized the other two books stacked next to it were part 2 and part 3. So I snagged those as well. And do I have those books? The books are in the other room. Let me see. Gathering of Gargoyles is the one after this. And then the other one is Something Pearl. I will make sure I add in the other 2 books into the descriptions when I'm done here. But basically, I scooped these books up right quick. I made sure that they were going to be mine forever and ever and ever and never give them up. But yeah, this book, I very much credit to the fact, this book, let's do the right side. This book, I very much credit to my getting involved in fantasy literature, and also basically my focus in college. I'm an English major, and it was one of those deals where I focused on Victorian Gothic, capital G. Victorian Gothic literature was my jam. I'm talking Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll, everything like that. So, and Dracula, of course, Lady in White. That was my love. I absolutely adored that literature. I studied it intensely. It was my senior seminar and everything like that. So this book is a very near and dear to me. So I thought, long backstory, not made short at all, and probably won't ever be made short because of it. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining while you could, Alucardus Verus. I hope I got that generally right. So I thought it'd be fun. Let's do a little story time afternoon. I'm going to start reading from this because the other thing I realized when I was debating, like, do I read something from the DMG? Do I read something? I was debating of Dice and Men. That's another good book for the history of D&D. I was debating that one. I was debating The Monsters Know What They're Doing by Kevin. And I was like, you know what? This is what I wanted to share because it is beautifully descriptive. The characters in it are complex. And this is for a young adult novel. They're complex for a young adult novel. The settings are terribly interesting. And ones that I realized looking through the book again have inspired a lot of my terrain. Like if you look over the desert terrain stuff that I've made on this channel, I was completely tapping into one of the places in this book. And I didn't even realize it. I'm definitely going to go in and I will put in information post stream because this was one of those spur of the moments. I didn't even know I was doing this until about an hour ago. But I'll make sure there are books, links to the books. I think, sake of transparency, I'll go on and I'll put in my Amazon affiliate links to these books. All right. So that way, if you're interested in getting these, you will be able to. So I thought, again, this is Darkangel by Meredith Anne Pierce. So I thought, let's just start having some fun and reading this. And it really is just so lovely. And I'm so happy to share this with you. So I'm going to start with chapter 1, and we'll see how far we get. They're a little bit more sizable in chapters, but we shall see. Yes, get back to work, McGill. Have fun making things. And, I'm looking at different chats here, but I'm seeing Mixonovicki is joining in here. Yes, definitely coming as a VOD. It could be one of those things where everyone keeps telling me I'm sort of like their ASMR crafter. Like some people will fall asleep listening to me, which I don't take offense to, quite frankly. If I'm helping you calm down and rest during this time when the world is the world, I'm good with that. I'm good being your story time. Severus Dracula. Oh, I like that. Okay. So this is from the Darkangel, chapter 1, The Steeps of Terrain. Ariel rested the broad basket against her hip and adjusted her kirtle. The steep climb she and her companion had been taking the last 600 paces or so had caused the loose-flowing garment to twist around the neck and fall askew. "I have to rest," she said faintly, and not waiting for her companion's reply, sank down on the hard, gray, bitter lock of the mountainside and set the empty basket down beside her. I'm not going to look up and read, because if I do that, I'm going to be like hopping around. It was cold up on the steeps, the air too thin to hold any heat. But Solster was warm and bare 6 hours from setting. Its white light streamed back at her from the western horizon, warm on her bare arms and neck and face. warming the broken rock shelf on which she sat. Ariel gazed out over the wide plain of Avaris, fair as a pearl, bright as a firefox beneath the black, starry heavens. Oceanus hung, a swirl of blue and white, almost directly ahead of her. Below, she could see her village over to the right, tiny, far away, at the foot of the mountain and the edge of the plain. "Come on," said Eodine, digging her toe into Ariel's backside. "We've still got a way to go yet." Ariel sighed and got up, followed her companion. Eodine was tall and slender, as befitted a person of lineage. After all, she was the daughter of the village syndic, and her mother was a half-sister to the satrap. She had a carriage about her, Ariel observed wistfully, all self-sure and comely arrogance that came of living all her life in the largest house in the village, with 16 different kirtles. Think of it, 16. Ariel just had 2, and a house servant. Ariel was one of these. She gazed longingly at her well-born mistress's hair, black as the heavens with a blue sheen by earthlight. Eodine's skin, pale and blue as breast milk, had a subtle radiance that gleamed even in shadow. But Ariel, slighter than her companion by a head, was boy-shaped still, her skin deeper shaded, a wan rose tan that even bleaching with lightning weed could not expunge. And her hair, thinner and finer than Eodine's, was silvery yellow, pretty enough by daylight or lamplight, but it took on a hideous greenish cast like unripe figs by earthshine. Let's say it is me, so we're getting into the story right now. Hello, Nathan. Ariel sighed and scrambled up the slope after Eodine, admiring the other's long-limbed stride, envying, but hopelessly, the unconscious ease with which the syndic's daughter held her basket slung over her back like a cloak. Ariel knew that even when she herself began blooming into maidenhood, as Eodine was blooming now, even then she could never hope to match her mistress's proud grace. After another 100 paces, Ariel said, "We're getting awfully high." Without turning around, her companion answered, "The summit's not much farther." "I can't see the village anymore," said Ariel. It was true. The turn they had just taken had led them around the mountain face a few degrees. Eodine laughed. "What are you afraid of?" she said, her sapphire eyes now mocking merry. "Darkangels?" She stopped a moment to let Ariel come up behind her. "You really do believe that old cradle tale Bomba was telling us," said Eodine, "don't you?" Ariel thought back on the strange, half-silly, half-deliciously exciting stories the bumbling old wife sometimes spun for her young charges at the distaff. She had told them one only a few hours before Ariel and Eodine had set out from the village to gather wedding flowers on the steeps, by way of caution, Ariel supposed, though this one had come out of more muddled and therefore more ludicrous than sobering. Isn't everyone a person of proper lineage? Eodine dropped her basket to the ground. Ariel watched as she hunched her shoulders and screwed up her face in imitation of the old nurse's features. "The rafts," she whispered, as if toothless. "The rafts that roam the mountains, snatching bodies, causing landslides. Believe me." She wagged one clawed finger at Ariel. "Believe me, girl. I've seen them. Don't you go up high on those steeps, or you'll regret it if you live to regret it." Ariel bit her lip to suppress a smile. Eodine always reduced her to helpless mirth. "And vampires," Eodine railed. "The Ichari, dozens of black wings and the faces of demons. One look, I'll turn you into stone, and then where'll you run, girl?" The syndic's daughter began to stagger, worrying her hands and muttering, "One swoop and you'll away to his castle to make you his bride. And you know what the Ichari does with their brides, do you, girl?" Her voice had thinned from a low whisper to faint hysterical shriek. Ariel wrapped her arms about her ribs and fought to hold back laughter. "They drinks up their souls," Eodine shrilled, then sank to her knees, gasping. "Oh, my heart, my poor heart!" Exactly as Ariel had seen her half-senile old nurse doing numberless times. Ariel gave up, laughed until she felt breathless and giddy, though the air on the high steeps was too thin for laughing properly or long. She felt a little sick with the altitude and had to sit down again, rest her head on her knees. Sobering now, she kept her face hidden. She did not want Eodine moving on before she could regain her breath. Unsmiling now, Ariel thought about Bumba's stories and shook her head. No, it was not the tales of Bumba that had worried her. Fat, good-natured Bumba, but Dirna's. Gaunt, furtive Dirna, who used to sit at the loom in the workroom a little distance from the others, staring off at nothing, her spare, withered fingers weaving by touch. Her tales were of a different sort from Boomba's. Dirna whispered of Dracs and witches, gargoyles and specters, horrifying tales of death by drowning. Aodine always laughed at them as she did at Bomba's simple-minded fables, but they made Ariel shudder. Dirna never got muddled in her tellings. She spoke as if she knew. Ariel raised her head from her knees. Aodine had risen and shaken off her guise. Pulling a few black strands of hair from her large, clear blue eyes, she kicked her basket deftly downhill toward Ariel, then nodded for her bondservant to follow as she strode gracefully up the path. Ariel sighed shortly, collecting her mistress's basket along with her own, wished she had a servant to caddy for her whenever she grew tired of carrying. "Cheer up, Worrywinkle," Aodine cried over one shoulder. "What vampire would want you?" Ariel shook the frown from her face. "No, it isn't just that," she began, starting after her companion and tripping. Balancing on the steep slope while clutching a basket in each hand was proving difficult. She scrambled to her feet, snatched up Aodine's basket before it could roll away down slope like tumble brush, and hurried up alongside her mistress. "It's just that the sun will be down in a few hours, and—" "6," cried Aodine, laughing. "We've plenty of time before nightshade." "Yes, but what if—" Ariel almost lost her footing again on the smooth, crumbling rock, and Aodine pulled to her feet without so much as a glance or pause in stride. Ariel held the baskets. "But what if one of us gets hurt," she continued, "or loses the way?" "Don't you mean, what if you get hurt?" asked Aodine without rancor. "After all, you seem to be the one stumbling." She laughed and did not offer to help carry. "But, by the Pendarlan, I know you'd be so clumsy I might have allowed more time." Ariel blushed and looked away. It was true. She was clumsy, and beside her mistress's deft grace always felt doubly so. Her companion tilted one shoulder in a shrug and glanced at Ariel. "Don't fear, little lameling. If you should twist an ankle or knock yourself silly falling off a ledge, I'll carry you and the baskets back in less time than it's taken us getting this far." Ariel felt her color deepen, bit her lip against retort. She wasn't lame, just awkward and unsure. Aodine knew that. Ariel's knuckles on the basket whitened as she glanced at Aodine. The Syndic's daughter smiled at her carelessly. Ariel's eyes stung. These were the only times she ever resented Aodine, who used that hated name lameling. She realized only to bait her. This time, though, she seemingly meant no teasing by it. Perhaps she even intended it affectionately. Ariel relaxed her hands and let her color fade. This is so good to read. I'm enjoying this. And also, those of you still sticking with me, I know it's story time. I know it's not the usual stuff, but thank you. This is fun. I'm going to read through chapter 1 and then we'll bring it to a close. Let's see here. "You needn't worry about the other either," her companion was saying. Her tone was one of friendly tolerance. "I won't lose the way, and if you keep by me, you won't either." Ariel sighed and shoved her thoughts away, falling into step behind Aodine again. The sun felt warm on Ariel's back, and the shadows, whenever the path ducked behind the boulder or ledge, were cold as well water. She dropped one basket from her hip as the trail grew narrow. Let the light, bulky mesh of the twined marsh grass bump along her leg. They climbed. She fell to watching the landscape, the lie of the rocks. She listened to the bellthorn, silvery thin briars that tinkled like glass in the rare mountain wind. She watched the small, rose-colored lizards sunning themselves in the last hours of solstice before crawling into their crags again to sleep for another long nightshade. She looked at the petrified bones in the rocks, the bones of fishes, eels, and water plants left over from the time when the steeps had been nothing but flat mud bottoms, and all the world a sea. Here are some," said Edwin, halting so abruptly Ariel almost ran into her. "You know, maybe I might make this a regular thing. Should we? Should we make this a regular story time for everyone? Like, maybe I'll just kind of do every Friday afternoon. We'll do a little story time just to sort of start the weekend off. I'm tempted. I am tempted. No, let's go back. Ariel eyed the low-spread blossoming shrub at their feet. Edwin's gazed forward and gestured ahead. "And there are more up the slope." They were nearing the pinnacle of the mountain. Ariel could scarcely feel herself breathe. The sky was blacker here, the sun whiter, the earth bluer, the stars brighter. When Ariel looked down, she could see the light, luminous haze of the atmosphere lying in the foothills on the plain. "You pick these," Edwin was telling her, taking her own basket back. "I'll get the ones further up." It was difficult for Ariel to hear her. The air was so thin. She obviously was shouting, but Ariel, only a pace away, had trouble making out the more faintly spoken words. She nodded her reply. "You brought a flask, didn't you?" demanded Aodin, taking hold of the empty one she herself wore on a thong from her neck. It was a simple water skin for desert travel, a couple of hand spans long, made of white kid with an ivory stopper and beads of tinted bone. Ariel nodded and tapped her own smaller, undecorated flask hanging from her neck. "Good, then," cried Edwin, softly as from a great distance. "Stay here in sight, don't wander, and don't spill any." Ariel nodded. Aodin slung her basket over one shoulder and went up the last, steepest 20 paces to the top. Ariel watched her easy, sure-footed ascent, her mistress's free hand resting lightly on rock or boulder from time to time to help her balance herself. Ariel wished that she could have been born so long-limbed, so self-sure, so beautiful. She set her basket down and knelt beside the horn scrub and began gathering the flowers. I'm sorry, I just looked up and I saw Shannon's comment. "Yes, but bedtime." Maybe, maybe I could do something like that. I'm thinking. These horn flowers grew in a tiny gray silver bush, which lived only at the highest steeps where the air was rare and perilously thin, not the slightest breeze ever stirring to disturb them. Each branch of the bush was covered with tiny, trumpet-shaped flowers, yellowish white, translucent as frost. Each trump was filled with a tiny drop of pale golden liquor, sweeter than ginger and richer than rum. Ariel pulled one blossom ever so gently from its twig. The trick was to gather them one by one, painstakingly, so that not a drop was spilled in either the picking or the pouring from the flower to the wineskin. The task was made doubly difficult by the flocks of tiny humming swifts, no bigger than fireflies, that swarmed about the flowers and lip of the wineskin, and could, between 3 or 4 of them, drink a horn dry before Ariel could get the flower from the bush to the bottle. She shooed at them with one hand, while keeping the other holding the flower perfectly steady. Ariel dropped the first emptied trump into the mesh basket beside her, and reached slowly for another blossom, and then another, and another. The motions became mechanical. Her back began to ache, and her legs felt stiff. But Ariel ignored the pains, waved away the bothersome bee birds, and continued gathering. Okay. All right, so this is getting some interesting responses. But let's see what happens with this. A marriage was to take place in the village at sundown, dusk being the customary and proper time for weddings in Avarice. Aodin, as eldest cousin to the bride, was pledged to bring the bridal cup of hornbloom nectar and the garlands of the wedding trumps, but these could be harvested only a few hours before the marriage, the precious liquor and delicate blossoms so quickly spoiled. It seemed to Ariel, as she poured the contents of another pale trumpet-shaped flower into the goat-hide bottle, that the humming of the tiny swifts had grown rather louder and shrill. She tossed the empty flower into the basket and ignored the sound to concentrate on carefully plucking another blossom. She imagined the preparations in the village, the decking of the streets with banners of white gauze, the bathing of the bride. It occurred to Ariel then that the sound she was hearing was not the angry whine of humming swifts, but something else. A voice. Aodin is calling me, she thought, as she pulled a flower away from the stalk. The pitch of the voice changed abruptly, intensified. Ariel brought the hornbloom to the rim of the bottle. No, not calling anymore, she realized suddenly. Screaming. Ariel dropped the flower, felt its droplets spill hot as a tear. No, hotter, not as tallow. It burned her hand. She looked up to the slope where Aodin was. The basket of wedding trumps lay overturned at Aodin's feet. Her young mistress was standing mute now, looking up at the sky. Then Ariel saw wings, very near. Great wings descending. A creature with more wings than she could count. All black, all beating fiercely. She felt a faint breeze against her cheek. For all the fury of those terrible wings, the air was too thin to carry more than a feeble gust. They were jet, those wings, as deep as the sky, as black as Aedine's hair. No, blacker, for they were dull, unoiled. They gave off no sheen in the light, no gleam to the eye. They drank up the light and diminished it. They were wings of pure shadow. It seemed to Ariel, as she watched that storm of darkness descend, that she discerned the figure of a man at its heart, a man dressed in some pale garment, a man of fair complexion. But the wings beat with such rapidity against the near empty air that she could not make out his face. Hello, more people. Hello, Colin, and hello, B. Dave. I know, 2 places at once. Is it working? Am I doing it? Okay, let's see what's going on here. The figure reached the mountaintop and alighted, but barely. His sandaled feet hardly touched the stone. Before him, Aedine cried out in terror. Though Arian knelt not 20 paces from her, the sound was distant, as though it had traveled miles. He held out his arms to Aedine, abruptly, as in command. Aedine backed away. The Darkangel stepped toward her. Ariel could only see the vague white shimmer of his garment amid the dark fury of still beating wings. Aedine whirled and began to run down the slope toward Ariel. She had not taken 2 steps before the vampire. I'm sorry, I said vampire like True Blood. The vampire had swooped and caught her. Ariel heard Aedine's piercing cry. The Icarus' speed and Aedine's weight bore them forward and down. His powerful wings thrashed the air. Ariel bolted to her feet, too fast. Her legs, stiff from long sitting, would not bear her. The vampire swooped overhead, so close Ariel could have reached to touch him. The world had reeled, and falling, she threw up her arms then, not to touch, but to ward off the cold, fleeting shade of those horrible wings. Her knees buckled. She felt her feet skid from under her, the Darkangel gaining altitude above her. She saw Aedine still struggling in his arms, but could no longer hear her screams. Ariel felt her elbow strike the earth, and then her shoulder, as a dozen sharp, hard, rolling pebbles dug into her flesh. The ground was in motion beneath her, slipping, sliding. The Icarus was already flying away, a dark blot against the stars. She glimpsed the shadow of his dozen wings, very small against Oceanus. "Aedine," she cried. "Aedine!" Then her head struck the ground with a sickening jolt. The back of her skull went numb. All the sky was white stars for a moment. Her scalp felt wet and warm. Then suddenly the brightness dimmed. "Aedine," she heard herself breathe barely, just once, just before all the light in the world went out. This is still going. Okay, we're still on chapter 1. We're not done yet. Ariel licked her lips and burned her tongue on the sweetness of horn liquor. She was lying on hard, sloping ground. Jagged pebbles pressed into her back like a great pus pox hurting her. She could feel the goat skin bottle on her chest and the warmth on her cheek and throat where it had splashed out, spilling. She was lying on the slope, her head lowest, her feet uphill from her. Her toes were numb. All this she knew without opening her eyes. She opened them slowly, saw the star-littered sky above her through the slight glare of the sun in her eyes. She tried to move and found it hard, very hard. Her head came away sticky from the ground with a soreness that made her feel sick and stupid. She got one elbow under her and propped herself up, gazed straight at Oceanus, a huge, constant blue with no shadow of wings across it now. She said, "Aedine," and wept. But she was too weak to weep much. Her hand was cold. All her body was warm in the sun, but her left hand was cold. She looked at it presently and saw that the shadow of a boulder down the slope had crept across it. That frightened her. She snatched it from the shadow and sat up, twisting around too quickly. Her temples pounded. She felt the blood running out of her head, and blotches of darkness wandered across the stars. Solstar was setting. She could see it as her vision cleared. It was barely 3 degrees above the horizon, and that would diminish as she descended the mountain. She twisted her head the other way around. The pain increased sharply at the sudden move. She could already see the shade of night across the desert to the west. She had 2 hours, maybe less, to get back to the village by nightfall. With the wedding procession about to begin, who would miss one little slave? She chafed the leaden, cold-bitten hand on her lap and felt nothing. It was numb. She groped for the flask at her neck. Yes, there was a little of the liquor left. She poured the bright liquid out onto the limp, waxy hand, then grimaced, rocked in pain as the heat soaked through the frostbite, burned to the bone and then to the marrow. As the heat diminished and was gone, color returned to her hand. She could move it. She got to her knees and then to her feet, took a step, stumbled, and fell. She got up again and started down the slope. The soreness in her head was mostly dull, but when she missed her footing and staggered, the pain stabbed. She clung to the rocks of the mountainside, to the scrub weeds, to the crannies. She raked her arm on bellthorn and scraped her knuckles raw when she slipped. Twice the winding trail crumbled beneath her feet and fell away down the mountainside like a tiny meteor shower. And always the sun sank lower as she descended the steep, and the shadows lengthened. The air grew warmer and thicker, her breathing eased. Solstar had halfway sunk into the sea of dust by the time she heard the marriage hymns drifting up into the foothills of the soft plains wind. Strange, it seemed so strange after the airless, muted steeps, that here below, still a quarter mile from the village, she could hear the singing so distinctly, so far away. She listened to the words floating in the long, harsh twilight. Fara twe, naret meri umni hardu. Here in the foothills, just coming into the village, the path was much broader, smoother, less steep. She had come this way dozens of times. Up the spring to catch the minnows, up to play in the caves and gather mushrooms, and just 6 hours passed up into the mountain with Eowyn. Pardon me. Ariel grimaced with pain of remembering. Eowyn had once pulled her out of one of those dark pools when she had slipped, pulled her out by the hair and pounded on her back as they knelt, wet and shuddering, on the slick, steep bank until Ariel had coughed up a half measure of bitter water and no more would come. That had been 2 years ago. Ariel's head hurt now. As she fled down the broad, smooth path by the caves toward the village, she did not want to think of Eowyn. She thought of the music instead. Thirus Sidil, Tem Kinteral, Ma'amobi, Tembril Feral. The words were closer now, a little louder. She realized that she was in the village. The smooth, square, whitewashed adobe houses gleamed in the dying light of Solstar. Gathering gauze draped softly from their dark windows, the great street that ran east-west was a long corridor of light. The little north-south side streets were dark as death. Antuin, Dantuin, Tevangel, Hem, Lepchel, Mirmichel, Gamberg, and Rend. She was passing the houses more quickly now. She could see the village square ahead, filled with people. Then suddenly she was among the people, who did not seem to notice her, but went on with the singing, their eyes turned toward the half-gone sun. Pushing past them, she gave a cry to make them stop. The hymn broke off, raggedly in mid-verse. The syndic frowned from his place before the bride and groom. The bride, in her new woven sari, glanced around. Behind her, the syndic, Ariel, saw Eowyn's mother, a thin-faced aristocrat with hair like night. Old Bumba swayed beside her, nodding off into sleep even as she stood. Ariel stared at Bumba and the mother. Eowyn, she gasped, breathless. The syndic, Eowyn's father, had been standing in shadow, came forward now into the glare. Yes, he said. Where is she? The ceremony cannot be completed without the bridal cup. He eyed the flask still hanging from Ariel's neck. Has she sent you ahead with it? She, said Ariel. She could not catch her breath. No, she... Well, where is she then? Demanded the syndic, pursing his fine lips. He gave an exacerbated sigh. How that girl can dawdle. Turning back to Ariel, his patience thin. Come, out with it, drudge, or I'll have you beaten. Gone, cried Ariel, marveling that even yet he did not understand. The Icarus, she faltered, the one with wings. The syndic shook his head impatiently. Are you gaming with me, drudge? Now where's my daughter, your mistress? Where is Aideen? Ariel gazed at him and longed to faint. The syndic glared at her and would not listen. The townspeople all stood hushed now, staring. Her head felt light, ached. She felt her balance tip. She swayed and staggered. The syndic eyed her with sudden suspicion. Have you been tasting those hornflowers, girl? Ariel looked back at him with dull surprise. I hit my head, she muttered, putting her hand to the sticky place behind and above her ear. She felt something once soft and stiff among her tangled hair. She pulled it free from the mat of blood. It was a feather. A black, a cubit-long feather. It had been in her hair the whole time. She had been coming down the mountain, and she had not known. Realization struck her with the coldness of shadow across the strong light. She shuddered once, staring at the thing. Her hand snapped open, but the feather did not fall. Stuck to the half-dried ooze on her palm, she shook her hand. Still it clung. Black and blood-damp, she could not bear the touch or pull it free with her other hand. The last ray of Solstar winked out like a candle snuffed. The square was smothered in a shadow. All was night. Ariel could still see the vampire's feather dimly, a black streak in the dark against the paleness of her flesh. No one moved toward her. No one stirred to help her. She gave a long, low cry of revulsion and despair and swooned. So, that is chapter 1. And now we have chapter 2. So, this is one of those things where, what time is it? It'll probably be, if you want to, it's completely up to you. How would you feel about chapter 2? Dare we do a chapter 2? Do we like the idea of a chapter 2? I'm looking at Restream right now. Yeah, the thing itself kind of freezes up, but it looks like the channels are doing healthy and hail, which I will happily take. So what do we think? Do we do one more chapter? Or do we call it for the afternoon? Completely up to you. What do you think, chat? I'm fine with one more. Let's do it, says, hello, Goblin Katie. More, says Jim Lee. Okay. Twist my arm. Okay. All right, we'll do chapter 2. You ready? Are you ready? Let's find out what's happening with the vampire. Let me just check and see what the chat's been saying too, because you've all been so lovely and patiently listening. I'm gonna do that. Channel your inner Pam. Oh, you want like that strong voice? Because Pam's the southern vampire who's a little bit more dry and sardonic, right? That's our Pam. Okay, Twitch has less delay. And hello, Dandelion. Let's see here. Did I say hi to everyone? I think I got everyone. And Lee, hi, GM Lee. Hello. All right, so we're gonna go into chapter 2. So, this one is called Vengeance. Need the sass. Oh God, I love the sass. Hence Cantriell. Who will kill the vampire? Said Ariel softly. The vehemence of her own words surprised her. She was kneeling beside the wide, low windows of the deserted alcove just off the empty dying chamber. Night outside was dark and still. Her mouth tasted like metal. She had not known she could feel such bitterness. She remembered waking hours, many hours after the sun had set, and seeing old Bumba, along with some others of the servant women, murmuring over her, moving quietly about the darkened chamber. Bumba had laid a cool, damp gauze cloth on her forehead. For how many times I have read this book, I just found a typo. Instead of damp, it says camp. Time passed, and then she remembered Aodin's mother, the syndic's wife, shoving suddenly into the room, the women falling back deferentially, uncertainly before their mistress, who came to stand over Ariel, white-faced and screaming. So she's awake now, is she? Why wasn't I told? My daughter is dead because of you, worthless chattel. The woman's hair was disheveled, her thin cheeks tear-streaked, her garments rent with mourning. Her face above Ariel looked like Aodin's, only older. One long finger she leveled at Ariel. Why could you not have protected my daughter? You should have given your life for your mistress. The woman's breast heaved in a sob. Why could the vampire not have taken you instead of Aodine? And then the sharp crack of the woman's head against Ariel's cheek, so sudden the tears sprang to her eyes. Startled murmurs from the servants. The syndic, hurrying short breath into the chamber, pulling his wife away. Come off, my dear. Such displays of grief are untowardly. You demean yourself before mere serving women. The Bumba's great bulk, bending over Ariel again and fingering the stinging cheek gently with murmurs of, there, child, there. Ariel, besides the alcove window, stared out into the night. Since her recovery, she had kept far from Aodine's mother, as she might. She thought then of Aodine, the mistress she had served almost since before she could walk. She recalled it vividly. The aristocrat's young doted upon daughter, pointing her out to her father at the slave fair, 12 summers gone, and begging him to buy that one. Aodine, who had been her constant companion since, more friend than mistress, though a proud and high-handed friend, her only friend. Ariel sighed bitterly. Now all things had changed. His daughter dead, the syndic planned to sell Ariel soon. She had heard the servants whispering in the halls. His wife demanded it. Ariel thought of the provincial slave fairs in Orm. Bids and shackles, confinements, blows. Here in the syndic's house, Aodine had always protected her. She would be sold northward, she was certain of it, deeper into the hills. Here at Plain's Edge, owned servants were sometimes treated with tolerance, but it was worse in the mountain heartlands. Tales of slaves beaten or worked to death. It chilled her thinking of it. Ariel closed her eyes in the dark outside. I cannot live without Aodine, she thought, or I would rather die than brave the slave markets of Orm. She pulled her tangled thoughts away from that, trying to think on other things. Already, the village poets were beginning to sing of the syndic's hapless daughter, stolen away for the vampire's bride. Yet with all their singing and moaning and murmuring in the fortnight since, not one of Aodine's friend or kith had stirred a step to climb up the steeps again and confront her murderer. That is not justice, Ariel raged silently in despair. Holding the Icarus's great black feather up before her face, she opened her eyes and stared at it. Its dull darkness absorbed and nullified the white and smoky lamplight. Without, the shade of night, now 3/4 of a half-month old, loomed blacker than a bird's eye. The white plain of Avarice gleamed faintly in the pale blue light of Oceanus. Someone must kill the vampire, she breathed into the feather, almost pleading. The quill's black plumage stirred, that Aodine may be avenged. There is no vampire, said Dirna, gently, her only companion in the small, empty room. She sat behind Ariel, combing out her hair, careful and back where her head was still tender. Then what is this? Demanded Ariel, twisting around. Her hair caught in the teeth of the comb, pulled sharply. Catching Dirna's hand in hers, she ran the old woman's long, leathery fingers over the feather. I don't know, hissed Dirna quietly. Her voice was always soft, sibilant, nothing like Bumba's deep-sounding tones. Don't know? Insisted Ariel. What does it feel like? The other side and... Hold on. I'm going to turn down just a little bit. It's getting... The other side and groped for the little horn comb hanging in Ariel's hair. True, dear. It does resemble a feather, but it cannot be. Perhaps it is a leaf or a flower or some high mountain plant no one has ever seen before. Dirna! Cried Ariel. Her fellow servant stared straight ahead and said softly assured, There are no birds even half so large. Birds are rose or pale blue or subtle green. Yet you say this thing is black. There are no black birds. It isn't from a bird, said Ariel evenly. There are no vampires, Dirna told her with infinite patience. Just as there are no Muddlicks or water witches. Ariel stared off across the room and held her tongue. Dirna had been this way as long as she had known her. Sometimes she wore an eerie look that told her she was in the mood for tales. Then she swore absolutely by the creatures of the dark. But other times, her eyes seemed to clear a little bit, and she scoffed at them as nothing but a mad mind's wanderings. The later humor seemed to be on her now, as Ariel despaired. Much as she shrank from Dirna's queerness, her calmer moods could be even more galling. Keep in mind, a little caveat here, it is a 1982 publishing, so some of the phrasing in here is dated. She wished she had not found her. She wished the other had not found her, come creeping into the little alcove where Ariel had retreated to gaze out the night. She wanted to be alone. She felt Dirna beginning to run through her fine yellow hair again. The air is thin up high on the steeps, she said. Fatigue can trick your eyes. Perhaps a landslide, perhaps she fell, I don't know. The comb pricked and pulled at Ariel's scalp. Dirna sighed. You mustn't grieve, darling. I know it wasn't your fault. Ariel stiffened and stared at her. Dirna seemed to be listening, but Ariel saw no one in the outer chamber. The older woman said softly, conspiratorially, Eodine was not the easiest mistress to serve. Dirna pulled a few of Ariel's hair from the comb. But she admired you in a way. Did you know it? How you took her mother's every blow with never a sound. You know she used to fly into fits and tears if her father so much as slapped her. Dirna fluttered her fingers to free the hairs. She was even a bit jealous, I think. Did you sense that, my heart? Resented even? Your mistress's jealousy? What do you mean? Demanded Ariel. Dirna's words astonished her. Eodine, jealous of her? Impossible. I love Eodine. Say nothing to me, hissed Dirna softly, and I will have nothing to tell. She found Ariel's chin with her hand and turned it away to face straight ahead. She spoke almost beneath her breath. Everyone believes you, you know, or else holds their tongue. The syndic believes you, else he'd have you beaten for truth. Ariel felt the comb parting her hair. They went up into the steeps with candles. Had you heard? Looking for the place. They didn't find anything, though, no wonder. You can't see a thing by earthlight and candles. The comb tugged at a tangle in Ariel's hair. They did find a few more of those leaves, feathers, whatever they are. So I heard. You were smart to strew them about. The body will have fallen to ash by the time the sun's up. Dirna's voice had a hush mutter to it. She laughed quietly, companionably. You're much cleverer than I took you for, little one. And there must be a deal more spirit in you than you've ever let show. Tell me, did you plan it? Or seize an opportunity? At sunrise, you can take me up and we'll hunt for the bones. Ariel stared at her. Her throat went tight. She wanted Bomba suddenly. She wished Dirna had never come. You'll find no bones, she choked. The only bones you'll find are the sea things dead long years. Dirna continued to comb her hair unconcerned. Don't fear, she said. You can trust me. The old woman's voice was full of pity. I know that circumstance. The altitude, a sip of horn liquor. Circumstances can make anyone a little mad. Ariel pulled hard away from her. I didn't, she said. You think I killed her? And I didn't. It was the vampire carried her away. Dirna shook her head. There is no vampire, child. There is, cried Ariel. Her teeth were clenched. Outrage welled in her against the Icarus, against Aeden's faithless kith and friends, against Dirna and her soft, slippery words. The feather crumpled in her hand. There is. Not so, said Dirna firmly. Now let me comb your hair. No, said Ariel, backing away. All is well, crooned Dirna with compassion. I understand how you must feel. Have I not told you? I killed someone dear to me once, too. Ariel looked at her with horror almost as deep that she had felt on the mountainside, and remembered one of the ghastly tales Dirna had told her once, all alone, in secret. It had been nothing like the silly, soothing old nurse tales of Bomba's. It was not even like the other ones Dirna herself had ever told, for this story, she had sworn utterly, had really happened. And to her, Goblin Kitty, what are you doing? Thank you, darling. I appreciate that ever so much. Dearna sat, comb in hand, near where Ariel stood up, and gazed at nothing. Her eyes bright and filmed over, blind. Ariel shuddered and shrank from her. "What's wrong?" said Dearna, turning her high-held head a trace. "Come here." "No," said Ariel, falling back another step. The madwoman reached for her. "Come here. I want to comb your hair." "No," cried Ariel and fled. The black feather fell from her hand as she ran through the empty dyeing room and then the crowded weaver's room. She tripped over a full basket of yarn, spilling the skeins across the dusty floor. Scrambling up, she fled the room, unheeding of the angry shouts that followed her. She found Boomba in the spinning room, hunched over in one corner, nodding off to sleep. Her great bone spindle lay fallen over on the floor, its fine wool thread beginning to unwind as her thick fingers relaxed. The other woman spun and chatted, ignoring the old nurse. "Boomba!" cried Ariel, falling down beside her. "Boomba!" Boomba sputtered and half woke, sat a moment blinking, then reached her massive arm to enfold the frightened girl.
What's this, little one?"
she murmured.
"More nightmares?"
"It was Dearna," cried Ariel. She said... Boomba woke a little more and gave a snort of disapproval.
"Dearna, eh? You stay away from her, child. Old tail twister. She's a little fay, you know."
Ariel buried her face into the soft fold of Boomba's bosom and sobbed. "I will kill the vampire," she choked, longing for Aideen and hating her murderer. "I will kill him." Her whole body shook. She thought of the Syndic's wife. Why could the vampire have taken you instead of Aideen? Now Dearna's words had made her feel even more deeply that it was somehow all her fault. The old nurse clucked and patted and stroked her hair for a while. Gradually, Ariel's weeping quieted. She clung to Boomba and felt no consolation. The old nurse settled herself a bit more comfortably, sighed, and drifted off into sleep again. The women spun on, unconcerned. Okay, so we're going to go into a transition. Like this is, closing here. And, oh, you can wave. Oh, how interesting. I didn't know that was a thing. Very cool. All right, so there's a little bit more left to this chapter. Let me just check and see how things are looking. So we'll finish this chapter. I think we'll call it a day because I'm sure you can hear my voice is getting slightly raspified, but I am very much enjoying this. So here we go. The climb up the cliffs was steep, and Ariel was out of breath, for she was hurrying. Soulstar had been barely peering over the rim of the western deserts when she had slipped away from the others at their morning prayers in the courtyard of the Syndic's house. Praying to the unknown nameless ones, they who had first fallen from the sky in fire to quicken this and then dead world, to the moon of Oceanus into life. Little was known of them, and they were not much spoken of. That sounds familiar. Ariel quickened her pace along the brittle mountain trail. No one had seen her leave the village. She carried only the long knife she had stolen from the kitchen and a small sack of provisions. She did not know how long she might have to wait, but she would wait. Wait until the Icarus came, or the food ran out and she died. Surely he will come, she thought. If only I wait long enough, he must come. Hear me, oh unknown nameless ones, she panted, padding rapidly along the narrow rising path. She had never prayed before, but she had heard the Syndic do it, offering up the house prayers each morning and the village prayers each night. Hear my words, prayed Ariel. Let there be justice for the killing of my mistress and my friend. Not any of her family seeks to avenge her. As I would, thought Ariel, pausing for breath. Her head was spinning from haste. Let them hear me, for Eowyn's sake. Eowyn's sake. I myself am of no consequence. The unknown nameless ones granted few prayers, she knew, and generally only personages of great importance dared petition them. She eyed the star-strewn sky uneasily, hoped fervently no blue-white lightning would dart down to silence her presumption. It was not courage that had prompted her to make this climb, only despair. The slave fairs would be held the next day month in Orm. Answer this entreaty of one small slave, O ancient ones, she cried into the thinning air, and I care not what becomes of me after. What did her life matter anymore? Aodine was dead. I will go quiet into new slavery, or dedicate myself at the temple to your service, or spill my own blood on the altar cliffs in sacrifice to you, what you will." All three prospects terrified her, but she made herself speak the words. Surely the gods would have pitied one so desperate. The dark, vast sky above loomed empty but for stars. She gasped for breath and realized then that tears were streaking down her cheeks. Her jaw hurt from having been clenched a long time, hard. She scrubbed the tears angrily, shoved away from the cliffside against which she had rested, and hurried up the path. "I'm a coward enough without weeping," she muttered. She gripped the long knife tighter in one hand. "But let him come," she prayed, silent again. "Only let him come." Solstice was a few degrees into the star-littered sky by the time she reached the summit. The air was thin, cold. There was no wind. She put down her provisions and knelt on hard, hot rock. The sun rose slowly, half a degree every hour. The constellations turned slowly. The waning planet did not move, sat motionless in the heavens like a great, slow, blinking eye. When the sun was 4 degrees into the sky, Ariel ate a handful of vegetable seed and took a sip of water from the flask. When Solstice was 6 degrees above the plain, she ate again and stood up. Her legs were stiff and sore, one foot prickly numb. She paced back and forth over the crumbling rock to get circulation back. Then she sat down again and waited, dozed, ate, and waited again. He did not come. Yeah, this is a very old book, Goblin Katie. The sun was 16 hours into the heavens when she discovered the cracked mouth of her water flask had leaked half its contents into the thirsty rock. Solstice had climbed another 12 degrees when she drank the last of the water and threw her flask away. The sun was thirsty, 6 degrees into the heavens when she ate the last vegetable seed. Her mouth felt tight and dusty, and she was hungry still. The stars wheeled on slowly. Her thirst and hunger grew until she felt dry and hollow as a reed. Solstice was halfway to its zenith when the vampire came. He came out of the northwest as before, but this time she saw him from a long way off. At first, she thought it was just hunger making the stars wink out occasionally. But no, she could see more clearly now as she concentrated, now that he was closer, that this small but growing shadow across the stars was more than a simple figment of her own fatigue. He was still far, and all she could make out clearly of him was the churning of his dozen wings against the dark sky and the faint, eerie glow of his garments. He came very rapidly as before. Ariel stood up, shaking a little. For a moment, she was seized with the overriding desire to run, hide, escape, lest he see her. No, let him pass, she almost prayed. Let him fly on. But there was no mistaking that he must see her now that she was standing, and no mistaking that his course was taking him directly to her. She held up the knife in front of her in both hands. He alighted on the cliff's edge, only paces from her. She felt the wind of his alighting and shuddered, but stood fast. His wings stilled, yet stayed spread. He draped and folded them about him in such a way that she could see little of his figure and nothing of his face. "You have been waiting for me," he said, his voice startlingly quiet, clear, even beautiful, like a deep, full-ringing bell. The thinness of the air did not seem to affect it at all. "Yes," said Ariel, and her voice was nothing, a muted squeak. She gathered herself. "Yes, I have been waiting for you," she cried out boldly, and could barely hear the words herself. "I knew that you'd be here when I returned," the Darkangel said. "Then you have done better not to have returned," she shouted softly. She wondered what manner of hideous creature stood behind those wings. "Do you mean to kill me?" his voice asked calmly, reasonably. The vampire's wings rustled but did not part. Hatred welled in Ariel, and she cried, "Yes, you have taken Aodine, and I will kill you for it." "I chose her as my bride," he said. "It is a great honor." "It is death," spat Ariel, rage choking her. She heard the vampire sigh behind his wings. After a fashion, I suppose, but it is a small enough price. And how many now have you wrung the price from Icarus? She demanded. How many maidens have you stolen for brides? Silence followed for a moment, as though the Darkangel were thinking. I think I have 12 brides in as many years, he said, then laughed. I am a young vampire. Ariel gripped the haft of her long blade tighter and started towards him. Stop, he cried, his voice of sudden commanding and stern. You have not the power nor the will. Then he opened his wings, and Ariel found she could not move for wonder. Before her stood the most beautiful youth she had ever seen. His skin was pale and white as lightning, with a radiance that faintly lit the air. His eyes were clear and colorless as ice. His hair was long and silver, and about his throat he wore a chain. On 14 of the links hung little vials of lead. He was smiling at her slightly, a cruel smile that even in its cruelty was beautiful. Ariel felt her knees buckling. The vampire caught her as she fell and seized the knife from her. He clasped her to him. His body was colder than shadow, so cold she felt the warmth of her own body running away into his while his own cold invaded hers. The air around them was bitter chilled, smelled heavy and sweet as licorice. She felt his great wings buffeting around her suddenly, and realized they must be flying. Where are you taking me? She tried to say, but he was holding her too tightly for her to speak, even to breathe. She felt the windless emptiness above the atmosphere, felt the vampire's dozen wings straining in the void. We must be among the stars by this time, she thought vaguely, before the chill and airless dark intruded on her thoughts and she lost consciousness. Her first awareness of being able to breathe again, he had relaxed her grip. The atmosphere was rare, yet thin enough to make her gasp, but she could breathe. The Darkangel's great wings still beat about her. She sensed the buoyancy of flight, and she was cold still, so very cold. They were descending, she felt it. The rhythm of his wings had changed, and in the distance below, she heard a thin, wailing, keening, almost screaming. It grew louder and more terrible as they drew near. Shriller it became, more raucous, hoots and shrieks and howls of hysterical laughter, until they were hovering in the midst of it. The buffeting of his wing beats grew so fierce that Ariel half swooned. The screaming swelled and rose. The Icarus touched down, stilled his wings. He let go of Ariel, and she dropped in a heap at his feet. Get up, he said. Ariel raised her head and looked around her. They were on the terrace of a tower, a tremendously high tower of cold gray stone. It sweated in the light. A spiral stair twisted up the center core and turned a level above. A turn or two above a level of the terrace to the base of the pole where the standard flew. It must have been woven of the witch's breath, though Ariel, so light it was, that even the seldom wind at such height could lift it, send it streaming back and forth from the pole in long furls. Gargoyles sat on the battlements. Lean they were, and the same hideous damp gray as a stone. They looked at her with hollow eyes, and rattled their silver chains. They had wings of bats or wings of birds, most of them, and licked their beaks or teeth with forked and doubled tongues. Two paced restlessly before their platforms, others whined or picked their claws or groomed their mangy fur or feathers, or lizard skin or scales. The nearest one snapped at Ariel. She drew away from them and pressed closer to the vampire, but he moved off from her towards the hole in the floor where the spiral steps entered the tower. Come, he said. They'll not attack you while you are with me, but you must not come here alone. Ariel looked first at him, at his beautiful, bloodless face, his colorless eyes, and long silver hair. She had never seen any living being so fair as the Darkangel. She glanced back at the starved, ragged gargoyles. They had a sharp stench to them, like rotted cheese or buttermilk. Ariel could think of no creature foul enough to compare with them. The Icarus paused gracefully at the steps. All of his moves were grace. Do you come? Ariel turned back to him. I am to be your bride, she said. The certainty of it overwhelmed her. The dark angel looked at her and then laughed. A long, mocking laugh that sent the gargoyles into a screaming, chattering frenzy. You, he cried. Ariel's heart sank, tightened like a knot beneath the bone of her breast. You be my bride. By the fair witch, no, you're much too ugly. Ariel was silent for a long moment. Then why have you brought me here? She asked at last. You are to be my wives' tirewoman, he said, then turned and began to descend the stairs. Ariel got to her feet but did not follow. The gargoyle shrieked and strained at the shackles. The vampire halted after a moment and turned to her again. Do you come, girl? What is the matter with you? I am not to be your bride, said Ariel. The vampire snorted. His lip curled with contempt. And why in this world should I have to do with you? Certainly you can see your looks are hardly worthy of one such as I. Look at yourself. There is color to your skin, and one can see the blood in your veins. You are scant and scrawny. Your hair is yellow, and those fig-green eyes. There, have I said enough? Ariel looked at his flawless white skin that had no delicate tracery of blue veins beneath his hair, fine as filament and platinum fair. Her own hair and skin were dark by contrast. The Icarus continued, However, despite that you are hideous to look at, I have brought you here. You can spin and weave, can you not? To serve my wives as tiring woman. Are you not delighted? When Ariel did not respond, the dark angel frowned and folded his arms. Girl, I did not think you fully appreciate the honor I do you. Ariel came then. Beneath the hard gaze of his disapproving eyes, the menace of his brooding made her flinch, and together they descended the tower into the keep. We're hitting another pause. All right, so I have a couple more pages left, and then we're going to be finishing up chapter 2, and we'll stop at 3. The castle was immense and empty. The vampire led her through the room The vampire led her through room on room of cold gray stone, rooms that contained nothing but an occasional piece of furniture, a carved alabaster couch beside a fine silk tapestry, perhaps, and that was all. The Icarus looked about him with satisfaction. Ariel gazed about in her dismay. Yes, he said. They took most of it with them when they left. This used to be a king's palace, did you know it? But the king's son died young, and his father grew old without an heir. Then I came when he was dying. The land had no champion to defend it, so the queen took her people far east, across the sea of dust, to found a new kingdom. This is my palace now. Ariel followed the dark angel through the empty rooms and empty halls. Have you many servants? She made bold to say at least, for she hardly felt fear of him now, only a vast sense of insignificance. There is only you, he answered. I had another tiring maid before you, but she tried to run away. She did not get far across the plain. I caught her by the hair and strangled her, then threw her to my gargoyles. If you try to leave, I will do the same to you. Ariel nodded. After a time, she murmured faintly, And what is to be my room, my lord? Any room, he told her. Find one that suits you and take it. And where are your apartments, my lord? She asked. I have none. There is only my bedchamber there, and it is locked. He gestured to the right. Through an arched doorway, Ariel saw another chamber, at the end of which stood a straight stair leading up to a landing. She caught only a glimpse of an ornately carved door standing shut at the head of the stair, before the Icarus turned down a hallway, and Ariel had to follow. He nodded back over his shoulder towards the chamber door without turning. I sleep but once a year. He led her down the corridors and stairwells, through the lower floors, the washing room, long dry and deserted, the storage room where no supplies were kept. I just thought, yeah, real Prince Charming, this one. And finally, the kitchen of bare shelves where no herbs or onions hung drying from the ceiling beams. But what shall I eat? Cried Ariel, dismayed. The vampire shrugged. You must find your own food. The other ones always did. There's a garden, perhaps. You will find something there. I, you may know, sup but once in a 12-month. on your wedding night, said Ariel. The Darkangel stood, fiddling with the leaden chain about his neck. I've shown you enough of the castle, he announced suddenly. Now you must meet my wives. He led her up a winding stair, down a long, narrow hall to a little door at the very end. It opened into a tiny, windowless room in which there were 12 and 1 emaciated women. Some stood in corners or crouched, leaning back against the walls. Some crawled slowly on hands and knees. One sat and tore her hair and sobbed. Another paced along a little of the far wall. All screamed and cowered at the entrance of the vampire. Yes, they are a sight, he said to Ariel, though they were all beautiful when I married them. I did not think the climate here agrees with them. Wives, he said, this is your new servant. Do not encourage her to run away, or I shall have to kill her as I did the last. The women looked at Ariel with caverns where their eyes should have been. Their starved cheeks were translucent in the lamplight. The skin of their faces pulled so tight Ariel could see the imprint of their teeth through their lips. Their arms looked like bird legs, the skin on bones with no flesh in between. They cringed, they trembled. One of them moaned, her voice was hollow. Their hair was all coarse and dry as blighted marsh grass. These are wraiths, not women, said Ariel, thought Ariel. The soulless and undying dead. You must spin for them, the vampire said, and weave. Nothing heavy, you understand. They are very fragile. Wool or even silk weighs them down so they cannot walk, but must crawl about the floor like crippled beggars. I do not come to view them often, but when I do, I expect them to appear presentable. Not wool or silk, said Ariel, watching the wraiths. Then what shall I weave? You must find it yourself. Something that grows in the garden, perhaps. He half turned away as if to leave. Which one of them is Aodine? Said Ariel, her voice fallen to a whisper, when she realized that one of the creatures must have once been her friend. The Darkangel shrugged. Surely you do not expect me to remember which one is which. He left her standing in the middle of the room. Ariel ran after him a pace or two. Where are you going, my lord? She cried. He turned and said impatiently, What business is that of yours? You are but a servant, and I have spent enough time on you. But what if I should need to find you? Stammered Ariel. Why should you need to find me? Said the vampire. Your duties do not concern me. But, groped Ariel, I shall be all alone. Alone? Cried the Icarus. You have 12 mistresses in one. Then he turned and strode off down the hall, leaving Ariel in the room with no windows and the wraiths. Okay, we'll start with chapter 3. Okay, this turned out to be far more enjoyable than I actually expected it to be. And I am quite glad that so many of you hung around and stayed for story time. So I think what I'll do is I'll see if I can try and make this maybe a weekly thing, like when I have a chance in the afternoons, probably towards the end of the week. Do a little storytelling, and we'll keep going with this book. And like I said, it's actually a series of 3. So when I'm done saying my highs and byes, I will make sure that I go into the description both on Twitch as well as on YouTube and add in Amazon affiliate links so that you can purchase this set. I'm hoping that they have an option to buy it in a set. If not, I'll get the individual listings. But yes, hopefully you enjoyed this. This was fun to do, and I haven't touched this book in ages. And again, like I said, the world itself is just kind of this beautifully fantasy realm. You know, basically, I think if my impression is correct, what I've surmised is that it is sort of a moon that rotates around the planet Oceanus, and you also have Solstar, which is the sun. So you get sort of this really neat combination of the skies with the stars and the planets in the sky as well. Really a beautiful setting, and as we get into other areas, it gets even more beautiful as it goes along. And Ariel is a very interesting character. She is lovely, she is wonderful, and I hope you will all become very much attached to her as I did when I was little. But I mean, this is actually, it worked out. I'm quite pleased with it, outside of the fact it seems that Restream has issues with, keeping itself running more smoothly visually. So just know in the future for WizKids purposes. that it'll be helpful to have the other two channels open up and attached so I can kind of keep track of things. But it worked. I'm thrilled this worked. So yeah, I think we'll look into maybe doing story time with V Friday afternoons when possible. If not possible Friday afternoons, maybe I'll do like a maybe a weekend afternoon type of thing. Oh yay! Drew, it's wonderful to hear. And I'll make sure it stays as a VOD. What I'll do is I'll start this up as a playlist. We'll do that. We'll make this the Darkangel playlist. I'll make it clear that this is something that I'm going to try and keep doing. And if I know I have a week where I can get this scheduled out sooner, I will definitely, plug it in and make sure everyone knows when to expect this. But yeah, expect it to be about an hour to an hour and 15 because the voice, it's starting to go. I can do some phone calls now and I'll probably get whatever the heck I want. I'm kidding. All right. So, I've received 100 messages today with Restream chat. It's telling me. Well, that's cool. All right. This is fun. I'm enjoying this. And, for those of you who jumped over and joined me on Twitch, thank you for that because that channel is it's my little placeholder channel. I like to use it for auto host purposes. So it'll be kind of nice to have content over there gathering. And we'll do something here on the YouTube channel. And for my usuals, whenever you want to hop over and say hello to me, every Wednesday I am over on WizKid's YouTube channel. Hopefully, potentially Twitch, because I think this will work, for Mini Mayhem. And that is every Wednesday at noon Eastern time. This past week, I just started painting Mama Isperia from the new Magic the Gathering miniatures. So she's getting started up. I'm going to keep working on her over the next 2 sessions. So yeah, come and join me over there on Wednesdays. Should be fun, should be good, should be fantastic. And we're getting pretty close to calling it quitting time for Friday. So for those of you, well, at least East Coast time, I am so sorry for my Pacific Coast people. Or as my little one likes to say, Pacific Coast people. So thank you for this. You can always find me. I have it right here. I am on socials, so please do come and find me. I am most active over on Twitter. If you want to stop by, say hello, say what's happening, I would love to hear from you. And I'm going to look at my schedule and see when I can, look into doing. Actually, how many chapters are in this book? She's questioning. There are 14 chapters. Okay, that's not too bad. So it would be like seven sessions. That's doable. So check your notifications. Mine were changed without my knowledge. What do you mean by that one? Oh, like making sure your notification bell is wrong. Yeah, if you are on my, actually, whichever channel you're watching, if you want to hit the subscribe button, if you want to follow along, that would be beautiful over on Twitch. And then, yeah, make sure it's hit the bell. Get your notifications, know when I decide spur of the moment to do this, or if I actually manage to get, ahead of myself in my schedule and get something scheduled. But this was lovely. This was absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Loved seeing all these names in the chat. I have missed you. I truly have missed you. I have missed our interactions. So like I said, find me for Mini Mayhem and we'll, have some fun mini painting streams and some product reveals and things like that. And here for the channel right now, at least while things are crazy, right now, reading a book, it's very much up my alley and my energy mode. All right, lovelies, my wonderful muselings. I'm going to wrap this up like I always do. I'm going to say this with the utmost sincerity to each and every one of you. Be good to yourselves and be good to each other. Happy weekend, everyone.